Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast.
And I'm Jessica Bun Bun.
Welcome to our Severance Season 2, Episode 10 reaction and review. This is the finale. This is our last episode for probably a very long time. Hopefully not another 3 years.
I mean, yeah, hopefully. I don't think it's going to take that long.
No. Okay, let's just have a temperature check on everybody out there. Let us know in the comments, like, how are you feeling? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you angry? How are you doing after this, monumental 70 minutes plus of television?
There was so many amazing moments in this. This whole Innie Mark, Outie Mark conversation that went on, 10 out of 10. This was so incredible. Easily Adam's best performance for me. I absolutely loved it. Every second of it, I was just like eating it all up. There were some problems with this finale. I'm not going to lie and say that it's perfect. Like it's as good as the finale for season 1. And I know we are supposed to love all episodes the same, but there were some problems with this finale. But overall, this finale was very good.
Yeah, here's where I'm standing with it right now. I think the first hour or so of this finale is astonishing, remarkable, just like incredible television from top to bottom. Like, I have some issues with the final 15 minutes. I still think we're set up for an amazing season 3. Like, I've been pretty upfront. The season 1 finale is my favorite episode of Severance. Like, it remains my favorite episode of Severance. Like, my favorite episode this season is probably Chikai Bardo, which was the big Gemma episode earlier this season. But I still think this is probably, I don't know, maybe in my top 3, top 4 of the entire season. It does have, I think, the best scene of the entire season, and you already mentioned it. The Mark talking back between his Innie and Outie selves is just incredibly done.
So incredibly done. And that conversation, sort of seeing it from the beginning where they're kind of excited to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Just like disintegrates so quickly.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
The best thing that Severance can do, and this is not just for Severance, this is any show just out there, is surprise us. Like, genuinely shock us with some of the twists. And I think there's some things in this finale that a lot of us may have saw coming, but there are also some things in here that I feel like it was really difficult to see coming, and maybe even a few central themes that I'll admit I didn't think enough about leading into this episode. Then that's kind of on me. So we have so much to get into here. Before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button because, yeah, I know Severance is ending. I know that's a really, really sad thing, but rest assured, we have so much good content still happening both now and in the future. We are in the midst of Yellow Jackets, The White Lotus. If you have Apple TV Plus, Your Friends and Neighbors, which is starring John Hamm, is coming up fairly soon. We're pretty darn excited for that. In addition to, of course, The Last of Us and The Handmaid's Tale that are also both coming in the near future.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone who has hit that subscribe button. We just hit 70,000 subscribers. Huge milestone here for the two of us. So thank you so much. And if you want to support us further, you can join our Patreon. We have a link for you below in the description where we are covering over there exclusively The Pit, which is airing on Max, Bosch Legacy. It's its final season. It's coming up very soon. And we're going to be covering Andor over there for all of you Star Wars fans. So join our Patreon, help support us, get some exclusive TV reviews and content. And thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. And I'll just take my L right away here, that I think I made a big mistake entering this episode, sort of just underestimating how Innie Mark was going to operate, especially in that discussion with Outie Mark, where this show, you get so lost in the sauce and all the craziness and all the twists, you kind of forget that, oh yeah, Innies are similar to their Outies in some way, subconsciously, but they do still have their own sense of autonomy. And so I didn't really think enough about that Innie Mark was going to fight back this hard, because effectively, if certain events happen, he's gone. There is no Innie Mark anymore. So he would basically be dying for the sake of the cause.
Yeah, I mean, this was going to be a very difficult convincing of Outie Mark to Innie Mark to be like, hey, so this is what I can offer you.
Yeah.
You and I, we will, I've been reintegrating. I will finish the process afterwards. Devin kind of confirms that that's not really the truth. It's kind of a lie. But Innie Mark doesn't know this, that I will finish the process and you will still exist. Us together, we will be one. So it'll be okay. But as Innie Mark's kind of thinking about it, he's like, you've had how many decades of Outie Mark, and I've only had these couple of years. Like, it doesn't feel like this is very equal. And, you know, I'm going to be part of you, and then we're going to be with Gemma, who I don't really have any relationship with your wife outside of, you know, what's going on here with Mrs. K. I don't have a relationship with her. I do have a relationship with Helly. And the thing that immediately made it all disintegrate, and I love how they tied this back, is that Outie Mark mispronounced her name. And that was the minute that Innie Mark was like, I'm done with you. I get to still exist. I'm in love with her. Her name is Helly, and it is the exact same thing that turned Outie Mark against Helena when she said Gemma's name wrong, and he was like, I'm done with you. I'm going to go and have brain surgery in my basement, and I am going to get her back. That he made the exact same mistake, and it has blown up his world.
That is just a masterclass of, you know, Dan Erickson, obviously, showrunner, Ben Stiller directing this, Adam's performance, like all of it kind of coming together, linking back the past to the present and sort of solidifying further that, okay, these are their own separate people. And, you know, there's no big reason for Innie Mark to fully trust Outie Mark because Outie Mark is thinking with his own self-interest in mind. Like, it was a very creative, weird, trippy scene, but I know a lot of shows, they're going to do this stuff just for the sake of showing that they can, that they have this much money. And I know Severance this season has been criticized at times for doing things that just feel like artsiness for the sake of artsiness. I know that was a critique of the Cobell episode, but I felt like this was really, really necessary because without this Innie Outie Mark conversation, the ending to this just doesn't make any sense.
No, this had to happen. And what I really liked about it was that it wasn't Outie Mark that really convinced Innie Mark to do anything. Like, you know, it started out really great. Outie Mark's apologizing for putting him in this prison and doing this to him. And Innie Mark's like, man, I never thought I'd get an apology for that, but thank you. Like, okay, we're off onto the right foot, a good start. I understand what you're offering me, but you're not really offering me what I have now, which is a job, friends, a love. I have a lot going on down here. Like, it's not what you think it is. Like, you think that you've put me in this prison and life is terrible down here and it's a nightmare, and that's not exactly true. I mean, I'm in love. Like, my life is pretty good down here. I have waffle parties, and you know, there are things that really matter to me down here. And while I understand Gemma matters to you and I don't want anything to happen to her, I'm not willing to, you know, you're asking me to give up my whole life.
Yeah, that's why Innie Mark's not a jerk. Innie Mark is just trying to preserve like what little of himself he has, and like that's really important.
I really do like that Outie Mark opened up more because I've always been a fan of Innie Mark, but I've been less of a fan of Outie Mark, and I think it's just because I haven't really gotten to know more of his pain and what he went through. We know that he's obviously really struggled. He entered this severed job so that he can forget his pain and what's going on. But we never really got to dive deeper into that grief, where here he is. He's like, I lost my job. I was heavily drinking. I just couldn't move past this death. Like, I thought I was protecting at least part of myself, my Innie, from this pain. Like, I just couldn't function. I'm like, this is something that I've long needed to be able to connect more with Outie Mark, because I've only been rooting for Innie Mark.
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty harsh indictment, at least in the world of Severance, but this goes for the real world too, is just that the lack of resources sometimes for mental health, for people who are really, really struggling, where Outie Mark thought that this was his only brand of escape, when there could have been other ways for him to heal, but we don't really know if that's the world of Severance. Those aren't available. He didn't want to seek those out for whatever reason. Like, maybe that's something we can get more into in season 3. Okay, so, you know, I took an L when it comes to underestimating like the impact that Innie Mark's self-sovereignty would have in the end of this season, but I think you took a big W when it comes to Gemma and what Mark was really doing here when it comes to all of the refinement.
Yeah, my theory really early on this season was that Gemma was going to be getting different Innie personalities so that she could probably be sent to a bunch of different places. We know that Lumen is in a whole bunch of different countries, that every time they need to make her be a different personality or create these different personalities, that they can have a whole bunch of Gemmas in a whole bunch of places. And that seemingly is what happened, that he's completed 24 files, 24 Innies, and that Cold Harbor was going to be the last of them.
Yeah, and so ultimately what we have been seeing is that Mark is the only one who knows Gemma, and inherently that's what made him so important, that you still have to have an essence of Gemma within a lot of these, and I think ultimately Cold Harbor is sort of the most detached version of Gemma, where a lot of this isn't there, and I think this is all a big elaborate research project that they can then use to maybe apply to other Innies, maybe apply to more Gemmas, maybe apply to some other weird biological stuff they've got going on behind the scenes here.
Yeah, because when we finally saw Innie Mark tell Outie Mark, nah, I'm not helping you, Cobell steps in. And that's where she's really trying to tell him that, you know, the MDR numbers are his wife, that his, you know, mind is sort of this doorway to Gemma's mind, and that the building blocks of her mind. It was this whole sequence back and forth was so important to how this all really ended up playing out.
Yeah.
Where we saw Gemma actually go into that Cold Harbor room and break my heart apart. Having that crib in there with the one screwdriver to be like, take this apart. Let's make sure that she has no reaction to this. I hated every minute of this.
Bad.
It just killed me. Like, this bottomless cruelty that Lumen has, it's just nuts.
Why couldn't Dr. Maurer die too? Like, we'll get more into the people who go later on, but I hate Dr. Maurer so much with just like a fiery passion that is very, very deep within me. But ultimately, all the Innie Outie Mark conversations happen. Cobell steps in, and we do get to this point where Innie Mark does go to the severed floor, and it's not the same severed floor, clearly, that was once there. I mean, look at the painting that's on the wall.
Okay, that painting, I can't with that painting. I saw that painting, I was just like, what is happening? This is, no.
Who's painting this?
So weird. Yeah, it's very odd.
It's all for the purposes, though. I mean, they're clearly, they know how important Cold Harbor is, because it is something that they're probably going to apply to a lot of other projects moving forward in their quest. And, you know, we've talked a lot about this, including in the theory video earlier this week when we talked about Svalbard, that it's just they're trying to sort of build, you know, you can call it this separate civilization or whatever, where they have firm control over everything from agriculture to people to fertility to whatever it is you choose. So, but in order to make sure this all gets done, I think they have to reemphasize to Mark, Innie Mark, over and over again, you are the chosen one. Look at the painting.
This painting of him in front of the computer like he's being ascended to heaven or something else.
Look at the automated Kier statue. Look at, none of this, by the way, would encourage me. This would all just freak me out. I would be like, even if I'm an Innie, I would think, can I not be an Innie anymore? Maybe Outie Mark was onto something. Can I just leave?
I like that the person that actually convinced him that it's time to help Gemma and help us Outie was actually Helly, and that she was just like, yeah, you know, I know we want to be together and everything like that, but remember who I actually am. Like, I am her. So even though I am Helly in here, I am her. And so, like, do you really want to sacrifice this whole other life for an Egan?
Oh, this was so well done. Like, I can't
also
phrase.
Pain.
Yeah, so painful, but also I think such an interesting evolution for Helly as a character, because we think back to season 1, what she wanted to do to herself, frankly, because Helena wouldn't let her out of being an Innie. But now here she is sort of willing to make a different sort of sacrifice because of the time she has spent with Innie Mark over the course of time, and realizing that what's happening is painful it's not right, that this is something he should do, and that there might be an opportunity for them to evaluate the future a little bit after the fact. Like, it was just very, very touching for those of you who are old school romantics. And, I like to think that I am. I think it was a very romantic scene between the two of them that kind of delved into a lot of different layers, at least between the sides of these two people. You can take the outies out of it for a moment.
Yeah, this is very much about the innies. We later saw Helly sort of giving this speech of like, we matter too. And that's been a big theme this season. We've seen from Drama and all their, animals, they don't mean anything. And, Helena, same thing. Oh, they don't mean anything. And where then you have like Milchek kind of being like, no, like, Irv is kind of my friend. I feel like Innie, Irv, and I, we have a friendship. Like, these are people too, and they shouldn't be treated like they're nothing or being put through these really cruel tests like Gemma went through with the crib. And that Helly is really now like this powerful voice for the innies, that it's like we can come together and make this world that we're in not as bad as Lumen wants it to be for us.
And I think that's a pretty interesting tease to what season 3 could be for these characters. Like, we'll have a lot of time
Revolution!
Yes, like, we'll have a lot of time to get into more of that as this video goes along, but I think this is clearly a direction that they're heading. But in the present of this episode, we see that with Helly's help, Mark completes Cold Harbor, and it's time to cook with Milchek for a couple of minutes here, because first and foremost, I've talked about this in the past, me and Ben Stiller, we have one thing in common, because I'm not a brilliant comedian who starred in a lot of films, but we're both very, very big basketball fans, and there's no greater reminder of this. This is the second time this season where Ben has put music on this show that is very much the music that plays before a starting lineup is announced at a basketball game. Like, before Milchek is coming out, you start to hear the music and you just get really, really psyched up, and then in comes Milchek. When he actually came in, I was a little bit... You could have gone even more for that, Milchek. You could have like done a spin around the room. You could have been like, yeah, but you were still pretty enthused, albeit a little bit out of gas because you're like running all over the place and dealing with Dylan at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that whole Dylan thing, we will get into that. But yes, Milchek coming in, having this really weird exchange with Kier, Robot Kier. It was so uncomfortable. This show is so uncomfortable at times, and I love it for that. But once they brought in like this marching band, you had the waffle pop-up card, everything was this big congratulations. All I could think of was, that band must be so loud in that tiny, teeny room. Here's like a quick story time. So when my grandfather, before he passed away, the one thing that he wanted to have at his funeral was a bagpipe, which is an outdoor instrument.
Yes.
But he was like, no, I want this. I want this played at my service.
Yeah.
I love him, bless you, Grandpa. But it was so loud. We were like, you know what? This is what he wants. We're all going to suffer through it. And we did. It was so loud to be in such a small space that when that whole band came in, that's all I thought about. Like, all those horns and everything that's going on in that teeny tiny space, my ears would be bust.
My sister got bagpipes once for Christmas. I can attest to the loudness of the bagpipes as well.
I have a neighbor who's all the way up on the hill that is like playing bagpipes, and I can hear him all the way down here.
See, the march...
At least I think he's doing it outside.
I love bagpipes. I also love marching bands because, I'll follow your story time with the story time here, because I am a former drum major of my high school marching band. I was the Mr. Milchek of this, and I already loved Milchek. He was already my favorite character, but the moment he comes out in the gloves and he's starting to do the conducting, I was just like, first of all, really good point on your conducting skills. It felt pretty believable. I was watching you closely, Milchek, as you were doing that with the whole choreography and merriment crew, this whole new group of people who Lumen has. So you just have a marching band hidden somewhere within this company. But yeah, the loudness of it is a thing. And, when I was in high school, we had a band hall. And so we had like all these sound absorbing, soundproofing walls that were up, all these paddings. We had ways to make it a little bit easier. But that was a very tight space. I will say this. The Ballad of Gunnell and Ambrose, I believe it was called. I'm not even gonna lie. This was a bop. This may be the greatest thing that Lumen has ever done. Like this, I was like fully into this music while it was going. I was like dancing with Milchick. I was having a good time, almost forgetting about actually what was going on.
I'm so glad that we had another Milchick dance off going on here
Yeah.
because it was so fun last season. It was so fun this season. Like, it's so ridiculous to
Yeah.
have an entire marching band in this tiny little space
Yeah.
where Milchick just killed it. It was really good. And yeah, to come running in there after giving Dylan this letter because he got a response from his outie of, being able to quit or not, where outie Dylan was like, yeah, listen, I don't love that you were fooling around with my wife or trying to get
Yeah.
with my wife or whatever. I understand. She's perfection. So I completely understand. But the thing that I really like about you and you being, still out there is that you now represent something that I could have inside myself. Gretchen has told me that you're really self-assured, you're really cool, you're all these things that I would like to be. And the fact that you exist means that that can exist in me. It just killed me. I just absolutely loved it. That, he was like, if you want to quit, I'll sign off on it, but I really hope that you won't.
That was probably my second favorite moment of the finale. I think that whole scene of Dylan just reading that. Zach Cherry's great, but also
Love
just
him.
the way that was written, and it sets up. We haven't seen a ton of Outie Dylan. We've seen little pieces of him. We saw the job interview. Like, we've seen some, but I'm hoping that this leads into more of him next season outside of Lumen, where I think it's great that he's trying to use this as maybe motivation to be a better person and to figure things out, because it's telling him that there's a part of him that exists within his Innie. There's a huge part of what his Innie represents that Gretchen loves, and that he can be that person too. And I just found that really, really moving and surprising and interesting.
It was just such the opposite of what we saw with the two Marks, where
Yeah.
Outie Mark clearly has an agenda. He wants Gemma saved. He will tell Innie Mark whatever he needs to hear to get the job done, to get his wife back. Where Outie Dylan feels like he just clearly poured his heart out. He just poured
Yeah.
his heart out. And he really admires Innie Dylan. And I think that's the thing that will keep Innie Dylan actually in there.
Okay, so we have praised this finale for a good 22 minutes now. This is around the part in the episode where I'm not going to say things go off the rails, but where I do start to have a few questions about the choices that were made. And as an aside, as we go into this, Severance was shut down for a long time because of the strikes back in 2023. And I know that there were some things that were changed after they came back from the strikes. I'm really curious what some of the original plans were for the end of the season, what was changed, if big things were changed. We may never know any of that. But the first question I have, both for you and for everyone out there, is that did the end of this finale from the marching band scene on represent enough growth out of Milchick for what we have seen the past few episodes with kind of the subtle rebellion? Yes, we did have him roast the Kier statue and being like, you're not really that tall, which was hilarious. I laughed really, really hard at it, but that was kind of all we got.
I'm actually okay with that part.
Okay.
And the reason why is I didn't want to see Cobell just completely rebel, which is not what happened. She basically wanted to get Cold Harbor finished, and she got it finished.
Yes.
She wanted to see everything to completion, and that all happened for her. She didn't really rebel the way that I think some of us thought maybe she might a little bit, because she felt like she'd been done dirty.
Yeah.
Milchick has been getting done dirty.
Yes.
We saw him actually stand up to Drummond, and I was like, okay, is this what we're going to get this season? And maybe we'll move into next season, or if there's more seasons after that it will continue to be a nice slow ride. And that is what happened here, where Milchick is very much sort of in between having the rebellion and being part of it and being like, I'm done with this job. I'm done with this nonsense. But he has also drunk the company juice, and he is really down with the company. While there are things he doesn't like about it, he is a company man. He is very dedicated to this company. So I am not surprised that the little steps we saw with him and Drummond and him in the painting and him and having that small conversation, which was a big conversation, but a very short conversation with Natalie about the painting, where they both kind of acknowledge that it's not okay. There's something not okay
Yeah.
about this, but that there's nothing that they're willing at this point to do about it. I would have found it to be like a huge jump if he went from these three things to I'm completely rebelling and I'm helping Mark and I'm out with it. I wouldn't have believed it.
Here's probably one of my bigger tinfoil hat theories that come
Okay.
out of this finale, and
All right.
that I think because Milchick doesn't fully rebel in this finale, that tells me that season 3 is probably not going to be the final season, that there's going to be a season 4, because I think
So
that's a move you make in the finale if you're planning for season 3 to be the end. I could take a huge L on this, but I just
that's
feel
fine.
like I feel like there's a lot more gas in the tank here beyond just one more season. I know it takes a long time to make, it's expensive, like all of those sort of things. But yeah, I struggle a lot with Milchick and him not doing more, but at the same time, I see what you're saying. The biggest thing to me that I need to know, and Dan, Ben, everybody at Severance, I'm begging you, Ben, I will say that Jalen Brunson is the greatest basketball player in the NBA. I will do anything. I will do anything you want if you give me a Milchick episode next season,
Oh
because
yes.
we need to understand more of why Seth is putting up with some of what he is in this company, because I think a lot of it, at least my headcanon, is just that he's maybe not extremely well paid, but he's well paid enough. He's got stability. He might really need this money. He might not have a lot of other opportunities out there. I just think it's really interesting to know, okay, why is he sticking with this? What is his sort of path to the future? Because I think that can just deepen the character so much. But clearly, they want to keep that mystery going a little while, which I understand, but that's also why season 3 can't be the last one.
Well, here's the thing too. We've spoken about this in our last theory video, which
Yeah.
is up here at the channel. What is Lumen's grand world domination plan, right? And I feel like some of the higher ups, like a Cobell or a Milchick or whoever, has an idea that this is coming. So if you're not with Lumen, you're going to be probably dead or left behind in the whole world. They are set up in almost every single country.
Yes.
And they are set up in very specific places that have resources that can restart the world under Kier. And if Milchick knows about this, then yeah, he might be really conflicted about it. But at the same time, he's like, do I want to be on the right side of this where I'm not left behind or I'm not dead at the end of this? So, okay, I don't like this painting thing, but I will put up with it to not be dead.
Yeah, he might just be waiting until there's enough manpower so that if he does rebel, he's got other people who are potentially on his side. And we've seen some characters who may have that potential. We're just not there yet. So there needs to be a lot more story. But
okay, let's put on our hard hats and talk about the goats and this whole situation that happened. And I'm putting on my hard hat because I didn't like any of this. And not just because, they're told to shoot the baby goat and they've got this gun on this baby goat. And I hated every minute of that. I'm a person who's very passionate about animals. Matt is as well. It's something that we both have a hard time watching on TV in general, but understand that sometimes it's important to a storyline to make a storyline richer. This did not add richness to it. And I think part of the problem is that they have said that the goats in season 1 were kind of a throw in as like a haha funny whatever, but never was meant to go any further. And then they got the fan response and were like, maybe we'll make it go further. And now here we are, where we had this whole episode that had, this whole goat hatchery type deal where they're like, oh, there's people in here, they're breeding these goats and, nurturing them and taking care of them and everything that's going on. And it's like, okay, well, what is it for? Is it for like DNA testing or something greater with the Lumen company? It's like, no, they're just sacrificial goats. It's the most base storyline that they could have given for these goats that I just felt robbed.
Okay, I have to say I agree with you. And we did a whole theory video talking about the goats earlier this season, and we never talked about them from the sacrifice angle because it just seemed too
basic.
Yeah, it just wasn't interesting enough. And I love goats. They're adorable on this show. Like all of that all of that is a part of it. But I think the biggest issue that I have with the way that they handled the GOAT reveal beyond the whole, is that really it? Which, it might very well be it. It's, I guess, always possible there's something more, but we don't have any evidence of that right now. But the other big issue I just have with this in particular is that we see Gwendolyn Christie finally back here as Lorne, the GOAT handler of mammalians, and she ends up being a part of this rebellion that's going on with Mark and Drummond, as Mark is doing his whole action-packed John Wick level escape and trying to get Gemma out and all of this. But the motivation that we have for Lorne, it was kind of set up a little bit earlier this season, where we saw that she was willing to help Mark and Helly to a certain extent, but we're just kind of told through her actions here that, okay, she really hates what's happening to the goats. She loves the goats. She doesn't like this job. She wants to find a way to get back at people, but there just wasn't really a lot of character development there. We kind of just went from, okay, here's what we saw from her earlier this season, and now here we are. And just for a big central climax of this episode to revolve around a character who has maybe had, I don't know, 5 minutes of screen time this whole season, and we don't even have people like Irving or Bird or some other really major people in the finale at all, I just have a hard time digesting that.
I agree. I just think that there wasn't enough time spent with her to have basically this one throwaway line of how many more goats will there be? And we understand that everyone that is caring for the goats really cares about it. We had a guy dressed up like a goat sitting on a hill. Like, they're very invested in these goats. And clearly there's been other goats that have gone through this sacrifice process. And she's like, how many more goats will there be? Is that enough for me to think that she's gone from that question to grabbing the gun, pointing at his head, strangling him? I'm just like, this seems like it went to an 11.
It went to an 11 with a character we don't know all that well. And we also saw on the other side of this conflict a character in Drummond who we don't know all that well, where I understand why Drummond was taken out in the finale, and I'm not sitting here caping for Drummond by any means. Like, who likes that guy? But it's also just like, we didn't really get to know that much more about Drummond, and I think in taking him out now, we are leaving some interesting questions on the table, and maybe that's, intentional, including, why did he cape so hard for Lumen? Like, what was his motivation behind all of this? Why did he go as hard as he did in these moments? And I just think that having him, another relatively minor character, be this involved in the end of this season, once again, it just felt a little bit strange and almost disjointed from everything else we've seen.
I didn't understand why Drummond attacked him in the way that he did to actually kill him. Now, I understand now that Mark has completed the file. They're like, we don't actually really need Mark anymore. But I feel like there's probably a protocol to that, and that the actual, board, if they're bringing in a goat to be sacrificed to the Kier gods, to be like, okay, let's make everything here, great for the gods, then just killing Mark in the hallway doesn't seem like what Lumen's plan was going to be. And Drummond is a company guy, and he clearly is. He's so much bigger than Mark. It feels like he would have just bear hugged him and waddled him right out there and put him in whatever room he needs to go into for them to actually decide or how they're going to deal with him and Innie Mark. Because I assume both of them are probably going to get wrapped up.
Yeah.
This didn't make any sense to me that Drummond would go rogue against the board and just decide to try to kill him and not bring him somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's just these 5 minutes in between what's happening with Lauren the Goat Woman and Drummond, and it's just like, that's the very weak link of the finale, and that there's a lot of really amazing stuff before it. I think there's some pretty good stuff after it. What happened in the actual hallway with all the rooms that Gemma has been around the testing floor, with even the way that Dr. Maurer was running, which felt very cheesy in a way and almost cartoony, but it felt at the same time, it's like, okay, these are not people who are prepared for this sort of crisis. Like, that felt a lot more believable for Lumen than what Drummond end up doing, where, the woman on the testing floor, I mean, she basically just swears at Mark, and that's basically it, and Dr. Mowers is running away. It was so weird, but this is a weird show. Like, all of that made a lot more sense to me.
That's why it feels like, for me, tinfoil hat still on,
Yeah.
that the people that are a little bit higher up, like the doctors, scientists, the
Yeah.
board, everybody like that, they know what the company actually is doing. And if it is like a world takeover, the company people who are dedicated to the company and Kier will be coming along for that ride. And if not, you're going to end up dead. So you're willing to do anything it takes to make that happen.
Yes, and I think we're just set in this really interesting position, sort of seeing the philosophies of all these characters like coming to a head, and who's really thinking about Kier or the company vision, and who's really just acting in the moment. We kind of get a lot of breakdown of the walls of these people, and it's just, yeah, losing Drummond at this point, it just felt strange, felt a little bit out of what we've seen the company values be at this point, but we do get to a really interesting place where Mark ends up bringing Gemma out of this terrible, sad room, and they have their reunion, which I thought was very, very sweet, very well done. Not overly dramatic, but dramatic it was just enough.
It was done so well,
Yeah.
watching, him go into the room as, himself, to be able to bring her out where she is now no longer, in that particular severed room, and they're actually able to have their reunion, get into the elevator, they're having this sweet moment,
Yeah.
and then, they hit the certain floor, and all of a sudden it's like, Miss Casey. It was just so well done, of all the different floors, of where you can enter, where you can leave, and what happens when you do that. It was so well done.
Yeah, they played around, I think, with all of that really, really well, in a way that kind of keeps the dark comedy of the show alive, but also in a way that shows you just how twisted what Lumen is doing really is, where you can become different people the moment you hit all of these different floors. And this is what makes, the final escape here, the end of the season, all the more complicated, because Mark, whatever side of Mark you're talking about, has to find a way to get Gemma out of there. But then Mark, in this case, Innie Mark, has to also make a decision. And that decision is like, okay, what do I actually want for myself?
Seeing him make the decision that he made, I mean, it's a very tough decision, where he's like, okay, I've done what Outie Mark wants. I have saved his wife. His wife is saved.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I have to go back and be Outie Mark anymore. Like, I can still be Innie Mark, and I can stay here with my love, Helly, and Gemma is saved. Win, 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 except for Outie Mark, and that to Innie Mark at this point doesn't matter.
I will say this. This is a very minor beef with the final 4 or 5 minutes of the finale. I got a little bit of Christopher Nolan Inception vibes from this, where it just kind of went on and on and on. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I get it, guys. Mark is staying. He's going to be with Helly. But I did really think it was a powerful ending when it comes to these characters. Innie Mark makes a decision that's really based on his own independence. It puts Gemma in this incredibly fascinating spot where, once again, just like at the end of season 1, I'm sitting here and being like, I don't really know how you continue the show at this point.
Yeah, like, we're going to have Gemma on the outside, who is now going to be the person, probably working with Devin, to get Mark out of there so that she can have her husband back. Now, she's the person on the outside trying to get Mark back. And Innie Mark is like, I'm fine to be in this world and I'm not leaving. And it's kind of interesting, too, of like, how does that work? Like, how do you just not leave?
Yeah, and Lumen, I don't think they're ever going to let Outie Mark leave at this point after everything that's happened. So it's just like, are you going to be confined somewhere? Are you just going to be used as some test dummy? Like, how is all this going to work? And there's this other part of it that we can now sort of talk about, where it's easy to sort of sit here and say that, okay, they're just going to shut down MDR forever. Mark's just going to be locked away. Yeah, Dylan wants to stay, but who cares? But then there's just this little moment earlier on in this episode where Jamie Egan basically says to Helly that he sees something in Kier in her that he doesn't see in Helena. And, tinfoil hat to me, that makes me think that, okay, Jamie Egan's not going to want to shut down MDR
Right.
forever because he wants to see what Helly does with this whole you have a part of Kier within her. And Helly may require Mark to be able to do whatever it is that she wants to do.
He is the person that is going to keep it open. He basically said, I don't like my daughter, but you've got Kier in you, and all the other seeds that I've planted have none of them have Kier in them either, but you do. And that's the only thing that Jamie cares about, and he will keep it open.
I think it's a very interesting idea now moving forward, because if you are the Severance team, you have to find a way to give what's left of the MDR team at this point some sort of job or some sort of responsibility to do now that Cold Harbor is done, to justify their continued existence beyond just Jamie saying, oh, you've got a part of Kier in you. Like, how do you do that? How do you make it different? Like, how do you evolve the show from what we've seen so far? Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack just with that.
Yeah, the fact that there was 4 of them, it wasn't just Mark and Gemma, has always made me feel that there are 3 other, we have 3 other people here that are also putting together files. So who are those files on? We had the Watchers, who look like these 4, watching them also putting things into files. So it's always made me feel like, yeah, there's the Mark and Gemma files that are together, but these 3 other people have files going on as well. I know that Irving's not there anymore. He wasn't in the finale.
Yeah.
I still feel like I know the interviews that are out there, whatever, but I never trust them. They're always with a grain of salt for me.
Yeah.
Because I've seen actors, showrunners, creators, whoever, be out here in these streets lying to us because they don't want to ruin surprises, right? Like, whether it's we might see him back in some other form, that actual Audi Irv is dead, which is what I think. It just feels like it's very purposeful that he's not in this finale, that the last time we saw him, no luggage, on a train with his dog going to who knows where. There is nowhere to hide. Lumen is everywhere.
I feel like maybe Audi Irving is gone, but there's still hope for, I don't know, some form of Innie Irving.
I hope so.
I don't think the Toro is done. I think we will see him again in some shape or form. At least I hope so. But I mean, the big questions we have entering season 3 are obviously, number 1, what is Lumen's real end goal with all of this? This finale does not resolve that.
No.
Number 2, like, what's going to happen to Mark now? Number 3, what's Gemma's plan going to be? I think it's a really great finale when it comes to a setup for the next season. Is it perfect, as Jess said earlier on? No, there are some issues that are here, but when it is firing on all cylinders, like, there is stuff in this finale that is just like next level, S tier, Severance, like no other show can possibly do it.
If they had just left this whole Goat Drummond situation on the cutting room floor, this would have been a 10 out of 10. And because that's in there, I'm giving it like a 9.7, 9.8. It's just that whole sequence just didn't do it.
No, it didn't really work, but at least we got something on the other side of it where it's like, that's not the note that we're left off on coming out of this season, which I think is really, really good. But this is the note that we are leaving off on when it comes to Severance season 2. But, this show has been a blast to cover. It's one of our favorite shows. We are eternally grateful, but be sure to hit that subscribe button because we're not going anywhere. Like, we have Yellow Jackets we're in the midst of, The White Lotus, as we said earlier, The Last of Us is coming, Your Friends and Neighbors is coming to Apple TV Plus if you're subscribed there, The Handmaid's Tale. Like, there's so much to look forward to, so hit that subscribe button, support us more by joining our Patreon. We have that link in the description. The Pit on Max, we're covering that exclusively there now. We have Bosch Legacy and Andor on the way. Thank you guys. We'll see you here next time.